What do you prioritize more? People liking you or your life's purpose? If you knew you could have everything you wanted if you just believed, would you take the first step or wait another 10 years? Here on the SDR&R podcast, we tackle everything holding us back.
Take these choices from me. Lord, don't make me stand. I'm tired of being free.
Take these choices from me. Lord, don't make me stand. I'm tired of being free. Tell me that you've got a plan, 'cause the sky is falling. That was actually yours truly in an old group called Poiesis. You can find that song on The Letter. It's our first and only album back around 2008 before I went to law school. So this week we're going to talk about choices and freedom and roles and how society has really changed dramatically and shifted in the last 100 years or so, but especially the last 50 years. So most of human history, by far, certainly Western culture, we didn't really have much freedom of choice. And this whole podcast is, I'm not really making value judgments because this is largely things that we can't change. If you can't beat them, join them, I always say. I think it's best to embrace things that you can't change, really, and find the silver lining in those clouds, or find the opportunities like we talked about earlier. So what has changed? So it used to be that we had very well-defined roles in all of society. I guess I don't know how human society was and culture was in the caveman time, pre-agrarian, like we discussed on the episode about driven gene types and all of that. But now that we have agrarian societies where we, grow our food and we don't have to be hunter-gatherers anymore, our roles have almost always been, very clearly defined. So what does that do for us? That used to allow us to, it would take away what we would call the tragedy of choice. I don't think it's actually a tragedy, but there's this great poet, I forget his name, but I think it came out in about 2005, but he called the poem The Tragedy of Choice. It's a beautiful poem. But we didn't have to choose. So if you think about it, choosing something amongst a lot of different options is actually really taxing on us. It's difficult. So if you have to make a choice, you have freedom to make that choice, but it's also very taxing. I do want to make a note here that I'm not getting into pro-life and pro-choice stuff here. So that's a whole nother set of podcasts and stuff about laws and everything. So this is just talking about society at large. Okay, so that said, to have to choose is taxing. It takes a lot of energy. And it's also obviously a great opportunity because you get to choose, right? So, but most of human history, when you were born into a structure and a family, a society where you pretty much knew from the moment you were born what the rest of your life was going to look like. Romantically, to bring in romance was like a joke. People didn't really talk about marriage romantically so much as, a prescribed, way that society and families would pass on property. Succession planning. It was basically succession planning. And, political strategy and things like this. But you didn't really get a choice for, who you married. You were kind of that was your lot, right? That's who you're with. You didn't really get a choice for your career or your daily job. I mean, you would just, that's what you did, right? Like if you grew up in a blacksmith family, you're going to be a blacksmith. If your family was cleaning janitorial services, like that's what you did. There's a comfort to that. And again, I'm not making value judgments because this just is, okay? But I'm certain that during that time when you didn't have to make these choices and you weren't given the option to make these choices, there was a comfort to it because you just do it, right? I mean, it's not a choice. It's like breathing. I like to talk about my experience with a physical trainer. So this guy, he was like really harsh, but I used to bitch and complain about having to do squats. To me, at the time, doing squats was like, I don't know, somehow scary or overwhelming. And so I would when I was doing the squat, I would breathe in a strange manner and I would sort of buck his leadership. I would try to convince him, I guess, emotionally or almost codependently to not make me do squats because I was afraid of them or something. So he stopped me one day when I was in the middle of this. And he's like, listen, we all know you're doing these squats, right? You're going to do 21 reps of these squats and this is happening. Okay, so no matter what, unless you're quitting, are you quitting? And I was like, no, I'm not going to quit. And he's like, okay, so then why are you bitching? And I was like, well, I don't like these. And he's like, it doesn't matter if you like them or not. You're going to do these squats. So you might as well enjoy it. You might as well embrace it. And tell yourself, I love squats. Squats are my favorite exercise in the fucking world, So he's like, this is happening, So if you want to make it suck, you can, but why not make it great? Because you have that option too. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So after that, I decided to embrace the thing that I hated the most, which was squats, right? And, happy to say, having embraced it, my form got better and my quads, grew. I grew significant muscle in my legs, and that helped out with testosterone levels, and, the rest of my body sort of responded with more muscle, and which was all of these things that I wanted, right? But it kind of happened because I embraced my lack of decision. I mean, sure, I could have decided to leave that, trainer and, not do squats and maybe just, look like those cheeseball bodybuilders in the cartoons, right? Where their, upper body is all that they've got. But, instead of skipping leg day, I embraced leg day because my, overall decision was to get stronger. So I think life is a lot like that. That's kind of a little microcosm view into how life is. So if we didn't know that there was an option, or if we were born into a structure in which there absolutely is not an option, to marry someone else or to choose a different career or something like that, we're more likely, I guess, to embrace that life and just kind of suck it up and, And once you embrace life, if you embrace anything, it's received as, pleasurable, right? So another good example, I think, is massages. Like when I get a massage, it's a deep tissue massage and, it hurts, right? But I get to choose to accept that the pressure on my back as, pleasurable rather than pain, really. And it seems maybe a little strange, but that completely changes my experience. So if I go into a deep tissue massage and I react to it all and my body tenses up and I resist, it's gonna really suck. And I'm gonna get bruises, like my body will, if you resist that, if you resist reality, it's not gonna be good for you. But if you embrace reality, you can soar, and I can get out all of these knots in my back and I have better circulation and I'm happier and all of this, right? So it really comes down to how you react to your environment. So I guess we're getting off track slightly. So in olden times, most people were born into a life at which, they would know the same people, 20, 30, 40 people that would be in their world pretty much every day for pretty much their whole lives, maybe less than 100, right? In a village. They knew exactly, and they were told, and they were taught that this is your, quote unquote career, if you even could consider it a career back then. It was just what you did, this is who you're going to get married to. This is about the age you're going to have kids. This is about the age you're going to die. I mean, all of this was just kind of prescribed. And I think that it was easier for us to embrace that. All of these things are up for grabs, right? Like we can choose a different reality. And that is really deeply fucking powerful and amazing and super American, if I dare say. But it's also taxing on us, right? So we need to, first of all, choose our own paths and our own lives. And that can be difficult because we have so many options. There's this problem with advanced children, right? So children that are told and taught that they're brilliant, they're accelerated learners and everything, and they really can do whatever they want. It sounds great at first, but then it's actually overwhelming for the child because they don't know what they want, and they have no, barometer or metrics to sort of do that math for themselves. What do I really want to do? How do I discover what's my life's purpose? I mean, those are big questions, and when you're in grade school, I mean, you're still kind of figuring your shit out, That creates a problem, or it can. It's also very powerful because we are able to make our own choices now and prescribe our own lives, almost, like a royalty could, for most of human history. We get to make our own choices, and the law protects that largely, not always, but largely our, postmodernist society is created, such that we can do whatever we want to do so long as it's not harmful to others, really. I think this is especially visible in relationships now because relationships always had very clearly defined roles. You had the man and you had the woman, and it was always supposed to be the same, and to think about it being any different, it wasn't even in your vocabulary, so you were sort of controlled, but you were also probably embracing that because, it's just the way it is. It's just like breathing. Nowadays, those roles are really diverse, incredibly diverse. And, I've seen a lot of men that prefer to take on more of a feminine role. And sometimes I myself do that. I can be very empathetic and emotionally connected, and monitoring that emotional connection or lack thereof. I can be very, artistic, and maybe that would probably be more associated with the feminine role, but I don't know. But I can also be, very structured, and I think that's a gift of sort of the masculine energy that I have, is to present a structure to things. And, regardless of how people are feeling, our children, get to benefit from this structure, right? So, in all of our relationships now, there's not these clearly defined roles, and it's kind of, where are you going to fit, and how does what's the overall goal of the relationship too? Like, it used to be, your goal is to, make children and have them be successful maybe, and maintain your property and estate, and, keep the farm going or whatever. But now it's very different, and it's up for grabs. So it can be stressful to be presented with all of these different options. And, but I'm sure it was also stressful to not be presented really with any options. So it creates this contrast. And again, we're not We're not looking at this in terms of like what is better. So it used to be that, obviously you could never get divorced, right? And the marriage in the first place was prescribed largely for you as a planned marriage, with somebody that you may have never met. But certainly you can't get divorced. That's not an option, Now, divorce is, it's very common. It's extremely common. I think more people have been divorced than not. That creates more, choice and it's taxing decisions, right? Because now when you're in a relationship or a marriage, I mean, you have to constantly decide, am I going to get divorced, or not? I mean, how bad is this problem that we've got, Is it worth it, quote unquote, to like pursue a solution to this problem, or is it better for me or my family or, everyone involved to separate, And there's all of these different types of relationships that people can have. So I think the choice is better. Having the choice is better, but I also think that, I can see a benefit to not having a choice too, because you don't have to make those choices. You just embrace it as is. If divorce was not an option for you, I mean, yeah, your spouse might be kind of shitty in certain ways, or really shitty, but, you got to figure it out, because that's, you got to make the best of it. And rather than like bitch and moan and kick and scream like I did with the squats, you figure out a way forward. I think about my grandmother. She was born in, the 20s, and I don't think her marriage was like the best. But she embraced it, and she's one of the most joyful people that I know. And I think if divorce was an option, maybe that would have happened, but it wasn't. And I also think that some of the joy that she has and in her life and in her marriage and everything was because that wasn't an option. So instead of considering that option all the time, you're considering how you can make the best of this. Right? So I hope that makes sense, because it affects so much of our lives. And it's the same thing, with your job and career. Are they going to fire me? People didn't used to get fired as often, and people didn't used to quit as often. It used to be, if you find a quote unquote good job that's paying well and, whatever, you stick with it, and there's like a bunch of loyalty, but now it's very transitory. People will, and transactional. People will come and go and, change their career paths and, all of this, all of which is well and good, but it used to be a lot simpler, and you didn't have to think about, well, is this the best career for me right now? How often do you need to have that question answered? Once every 5 years? Is it once every year? Once a quarter? Once a month? I mean, it's different, right? The other thing is that technology is changing and improving, but our mental capacity, our emotional capacities aren't really keeping up with this either. And technology doubles it every 7 years, which is insane now. It used to be every 1,000 years it would double, or even more. So your life would not be changed by technology really, because you'd go through 10 or 20 generations, right, before technology would double. And you had plenty of time to emotionally, spiritually, intellectually adjust to that change. Now, social media popped up around 2009, I guess, and now it's completely overhauled our entire culture and structure of our daily lives for a lot of people. I mean, younger folks, I would say. Social interaction is very different now from when I was growing up. I have seen that it's very difficult for, Gen Alphas and Gen Zs to sometimes socially connect and interact on an in-person basis. With all of this change, with all of the options that technology gives us, with the option to quit or change our career path, with the option to change life partners. And I mean, even the term life partner seems a little off these days, because most people don't spend their entire lives with one partner. Usually there's more often than not, there's more than that, right? So with all of these choices and options, you get to make the choices, but you also have to take the time and the energy necessary to make those choices. I think that's kind of the crux of what we're saying here for this whole podcast, is that yes, you have a lot of choices and things, but you have to be the one to make these choices. Okay, you can't react. You can't make the choices for yourself, for your life, for your career, for your, partner, right? You can't reactively allow those decisions to be made for you. And let me be more specific. You absolutely can allow people to make those decisions for you. Technology, artificial intelligence via social media, it can deeply, deeply persuade us to, do what it wants us to do. I mean, marketing and advertising is insane now, how well it has hacked our reptilian, brainstem, right? So if we don't make these choices for ourselves, these choices will be made for us by companies, by, actors upon us, and we will become the subject of the action in the sentence, not the actor. You need to be the actor in your own life. This podcast is called Success Decisions in Rock and Roll. Okay, so you have to make the decision or it will be made for you. And if it's made for you, it's probably not best for you. So that means taking time and deliberately, intentionally going over the decisions you are making and the choices and options you have regularly as a discipline. So if someone pisses you off and you react, and you make a knee-jerk decision, that might not be best for you. Like, I would not make decisions reactively. Instead, I would say, what do you want in your life? How do you want to spend your life? Map it out and then make the decisions for you. Okay, selfishly, independently. Because if you're not making the decisions for you, they will absolutely be made for you by someone else who has their own selfish, desires and things. And are they going to make a decision that's good for you? Maybe. Or they might make a decision that's very bad for you. And nobody's going to rescue you out of that. The only person that can solve that is you. Okay, so let's take advantage, let's embrace all of this change, understand and be happy about the fact that we now have choices. We are no longer, heavy conformists. We are no longer slaves. We are no longer having to do what, was prescribed for us before we were even born, right? We get to choose our partners. We get to choose our careers. We get to choose how we spend our lives largely, okay? But we have to own that. We have to take those choices and actually make the choice. Otherwise, I think it's going to be worse, right? So those prescriptions for life, for your career, for your partner, for your family, for all of these things, that conformity was often good. There were a lot of good elements to it. Having those clear-cut roles in a relationship often worked out. I would say it probably was developed and evolved culturally out of chaos because it helped most people to be happy and live a good life. So now we've sort of thrown that all by the wayside, and you need to choose and consistently navigate the waters, consistently retune and retool your choices and your life that you want for you as a unique human being that will never be on this planet again. Okay, so embrace your choices. That's reality now. Take advantage of those. Own your choices, your ability to make choices. I know the song is sort of elegy about, there's too many choices. And that I'm just trying to capture the feeling of having too many choices in that song. But my advice to you overall is to own it, right? So we have been given American freedom. Modern developed nations have freedom now to make these choices ourselves. But if we don't make the choices, we're just going to do what all of the other corporations and artificial intelligence and marketing machines want us to do. And that would suck. So success, decisions, and rock and roll. Keep rocking, guys. We'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to hear more, check us out on JonathanSparksMusic.com, JONATHAN SparksMusic.com. Please like and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We love you guys. We'll talk soon.